Okay, here we are.
Okay.
What do we have here?
This is a hind leg of a deer, and this is the dirty side. And I always lay the dirty side up. This is the pelvis up here, and this is, of course, is the ankle, the lower leg. Got your tendon. I always run my knife up. Very important not to cut this up to this point because you can't hang your deer otherwise. I just run that up and waste a little bit of meat because that tendon goes up into there. So that's pretty nasty stuff. So basically get it to where I can start to see the bone, and I'll make that cut. You see how clean that is along the bone? And then I do the same thing here. There's some of that nasty sinewy stuff that you can trim out, and then just try and stay close to the bone. See where I followed the bone there, and then come on the bottom side and do the same thing. Just try and see how clean that is up against the bone there. Just use the bone to guide your knife. And then you come up here to the joint, to the knee, and you're going to want to try and find that joint, which sometimes I can find it like I'm an expert, and sometimes I suffer and strain to get right there. There, I got it. I was still going too low. Okay, see how I split that on the front side. You can also come from this back side, join it up, and then when you get it exposed, you can get your knife in there and just pop it out. There's a ask Christine about the ACL.
Yeah, I always
And there you go. See, there's a minuscule amount of meat on there. As far as I'm concerned, that's ready to throw into the dog bowl. You can trim that if you want, but that's where you get cut, is trying to get that last little lower leg. And you kind of see where the bone was, so you just take that down to the table. And what I like to do is keep everything on the table as much as possible to where I've got a good surface. So that's all grind. It's just infused with that big piece of sinew. And there's another thing that I try and do, is cut out that real thick. You can hear it when that hits the grinder. So that's trim that can be trimmed up later. And that's scrap. Okay, now we turn it around, and we got the pelvis, which is attached. Same kind of a deal. It just has a little eye, and it's kind of a flat bone, and you're going to have to work your knife around it to follow it. And try not to cut in there real deep to where you cut into your steaks. Just come on that back side of that pelvis. You see how I've opened it up down there. Just try and stay close to the bone. And this is the dirtiest part of the deer, because this is where the gut spilled out through that open pelvis when you field dressed it. So I've almost got this done. See where I've got, see, that's all that whole pelvis bone, so there's very little meat left on it. And again, can you see where it rotates on the hip in there? Try and get in there and see I just popped that off. See how easy that came out. And do not try and trim that, because that is nasty, and clean your knife and your hands after you've trimmed that out. Okay, so we got the pelvis off, and now we just have the femur bone. And basically all we're going to do is try and get the meat. Just going to try and get the meat, and again try not to jab your knife in there real deep, and just use the knife, the bone as a guide. And get in there with the tip of the knife and stay close to the bone, using the bone as a guide. Keeping your fingers out of the cutting zone. And I'm lifting this up just for video purposes. See how I've got just trimming that bone out? I'm coming over here to clean it off, and again just follow the bone around the joint. And again, there's a bite or two left on there, but it's a lot of work to get off 2 more bites of meat, and that's where you cut yourself. Okay, now we've got the whole ham, which is the bottom and the top round. You see there's a seam there, and if you follow that seam with your knife and open that up, it's just a natural seam that you don't want to cut into.
There's a gland in there.
Yeah, there's a gland in there, which we'll see here in a second, but we'll go ahead and... Okay, now we have our rounds separated. This is the bottom round, the good round, as John calls the tasty round. And here's your eye of round. And there is a gland right in here normally, especially on that old buck. But I'll go ahead and trim that eye of round out, and that makes good stew meat, or if it's a tender deer or anything. But there's your eye of round. And when Tom cut, he had the knife at a funny angle, so this is actually part of his sirloin or jerky, which would have been taken off normally, but there's a little bit of hunk on that in there, which normally wouldn't be there. So here's your top round, and that just needs to get trimmed up. And there's a little odd piece here of the shank, and then this gland and piece of fat in here, which you don't want to cut through but cut out. And basically at this point it's just trim now. And this cap here will actually just kind of peel off. You see how again there's a metal or meat separation. So I'm just peeling that off, and again, to me this is way easier to do it on the table. Now, see how that cap just comes off of there. And then again, you can trim that up. But there's basically your nice beautiful bottom round there, just a little bit of trimming and it'll be done. And a little piece of trim, and then your top round and a little bit of trimming and it'll be done. Just get that silver skin and the fat off. So really you're done. You broke it down. I don't know if that took on a video 5 minutes or 3 minutes.